Hi everyone, if you're new, welcome to the channel. If you like the content, if you're interested in the content, please think about subscribing. So one thing that I think's noticeable in the culture wars is, particularly in recent years, is debates around what the term woke means and its alleged misuse, um, in in debates around the culture wars. Um, I actually think both left and right are guilty in a way. That may not surprise you coming from someone who is centrist in his channel name, but I do see it. I do see nonsense from both sides regarding this term woke. And I'm going to cite an example from the Scottish Daily Mail of what would be described as a case study. I'll get into that in a second, but I think the left are guilty of being dishonest when it comes to woke dogma because a typical response would be it's just about being compassionate. And why is that a bad thing? So they dress it up like it's a right wing backlash to wanting to be open minded and progressive and anti racism, anti sexism, and anti every other ism out there. Um, and they say that the term is thrown around as an insult, but it should be it should almost be a compliment. Well, it is worth noting that the origins of the term we could date back to about the 70s. It may be older than that. I think it goes back to about the 70s. And it was used by African Americans at the time to describe being awoken to injustice, hence being woke. And then it sort of got back into a vernacular, I would say around the mid 2010s. So let's say around the last 10 years. Um, I do think that the right has overplayed it on to some extent. I do think that every time, there's some proposal for a focus on ecology or tackling racism or something like that, there are some on the right who would just say, "Oh, that's woke, this is woke," and I don't think the right have necessarily done a good job of countering it. Um, but I also think the left are dishonest when they say it's just about compassion. Now, the case study I'm going to read out is clearly nonsense. Um, and this is why I personally do have a problem with woke dogma. Now, I'm someone who does believe in social justice. I'm someone who does believe in equality for all. And I'm someone who I would say in some of my politics I'm quite progressive. I wouldn't. It'd be wrong to say that's across the board. It really depends on the issue. But um, I do dislike woke dogma. I don't just dislike it. I loathe it because I think that it is very intolerant, dogmatic, controlling, and dishonest. And this is a good example of it. Now, granted, some people would say, "Oh, but source, Nathan, it's the Daily Mail." Okay, but is the Guardian or the Eye going to cover something like this? No, they're not. That's the reality. So the Mail has its uses. It will cover this sort of stuff. Unlawful woke course for white actors. This report, I should say, is from May the 27th. And it doesn't mention the journalist in this particular report. White actors in a new play starring Brian Cox about the collapse of RBS, that's Bank of Scotland, have been offered woke training, sparking a complaint to the UK Equalities Watchdog. An anti-oppression training brief from the National Theatre of Scotland, NTS, which is staging the production and Make It Happen at Dundee Rep, outlines topics to be discussed during the £1,500 course. These include anti-racism and anti-blackness, quote, anti-blackness, has led to accusations of racism towards NTS bosses. The organisation has been reported to the Equalities and Human Rights Commission for discrimination by the Free Speech Union, which said it's obviously unlawful and totally racist. Tory MSP Murdo Fraser said this kind of nonsense is an affront to free speech. An NTS spokesman said this training is not mandatory. Well, this is typical of the sort of thing that critics point to woke dogma being an issue. The fact that you would have white actors, I mean, it's all very well saying that it's not mandatory, but really, I think in that situation, if an actor says, "Oh, I don't want to do that," I mean, are they really going to be given a choice? It's like you hear cases of nurses in the NHS having to take mandatory courses and similar sort of um, diverse programs. The problem is often with this sort of thing It's not just about, look, this is a diverse environment, there's different people working here, respect everyone, which would be okay. It's actually, I'll just say it, I do think there is an anti-white aspect to woke dogma, which is the idea that in order to be progressive, you have to be against the whites majority. Um, you have to push a victimhood narrative, which actually I would argue insults black people. I mean, what the hell is anti-blackness? It's nonsensical. It really is nonsensical. And I think NTS is making a bit of a cop out by claiming it's not mandatory. That isn't the point. The point is that it's nonsense. Now, there will be some on the left that say, oh, it's just a Daily Mail cherry picking, there's more to it. There are so many cases like this, really, in recent years. Um, I just think it's shackling. I think the entertainment industry on both sides of the Atlantic has been hijacked by this. If we look at what's happened in Hollywood in recent years, and some of it absolutely does have a very logical foundation and a very valid foundation. I would argue Me Too definitely had basis. But something like Oscars So White, excuse me, which I've quoted before, the idea that just because there doesn't happen to be any black nominees in a particular year, then there has to be radical change. It ignored the fact that there had actually been black nominees in previous years and black winners. Now, Hollywood is about American cinema, and whilst it isn't evenly distributed, it varies from state to state. The United States is still a majority white country. I'm not saying that as a supremacist thing, it's just a fact. So if the film industry is to look like the public, then you're going to have more white actors in a country that's majority white. I think that historically, certainly minority actors were overlooked for sure, and there was definitely some pretty lazy stereotyping going on in the past. When you had white actors donning blackface and yellowface, I understand why that is archaic and why it isn't done today. But I think we've almost went to the other level of, I would say if you look at the 50s where you had the blacklisting of alleged communists, it went too far. Um, Careers were destroyed, in many cases unfairly so, I would argue. But I actually think that if an actor today, especially if he's a white male actor, was to say, "Well, wait a second, this is too shackling, this is too," I honestly think there's a chance his career would be burned. He would be seen as toxic, he would be seen as problematic simply for having a view like that, for saying that, let's just treat everyone as equal. Let's not say this film has to have a quota of how many actors should be, how actors should be represented. There's another thing worth considering. Actors act. The point is it's portraying a different character. So when I see actors say things like, oh, no non-gay actor, no, well, actually, Michael Sheen recently claimed no non-Welsh actor should play Welsh roles. Well, I'm sorry, Mr. Sheen, actors are playing another person. That's the whole point of acting. The only caveat would be if, when it comes to race and when it's obviously just not believable, I mean, I think there's a good reason why white actors shouldn't play black historic figures, but I would argue it should be the other way around as well. And I think when it goes the other way around, it's just tokenism and it's just saying we're going to do this to shake up the system and show how rebellious we are and show how diverse we are and color. So I'm against colorblind casting in those sorts of situations where it's just non-believable. I mean, when you have a black actress playing Anne Boleyn, it's it's patronizing to the audience because everyone knows she was a historically white queen consort. This is not to say that the woman playing her is a bad actress. I never saw it. I don't know whether her actual talent is good or not, but it's beside the point. Um, so that's another issue I take with woke dogma. It's hypocrisy. The notion it's anti-racism when actually it's quite explicitly racist toward white people. I just think it causes more problems than it solves, and I don't think it's actually particularly progressive. It's dogmatic, it's controlling, um, it's a veneer, a sort of facade of progress, and I really don't think it is. To me, progress is giving people the opportunities, people who may be disadvantaged in life, giving them better opportunities. I'm all for that. That could be from a socio-economic point of view. It could be that there's minority groups that are more disadvantaged in certain areas, in which case provide opportunities. But opportunities is a different thing from awards. Opportunities is a different thing from disregarding meritocracy. Um, and the problem with woke dogma is, like I say, what really, really annoys me about it is this idea that anyone who criticizes it is somehow against progress. It's the most dishonest thing to say, well, it's just about being compassionate. Well, is it compassionate to hound women out of their professions because they say that biology matters on the trans debate, in the trans debate? Is it progressive and compassionate to literally call for violence against so-called turf women? I mean, the hypocrisy of woke people is pathetic. I'm always wary of people who go around labeling themselves anti-racist or anti-sexist. Any decent person will be against bigotry. That goes without saying. But I just think it's condescending and unegalitarian to constantly treat people like they are a perpetual victim. Let's treat people as individuals. Let's stop seeing them as black or white or men or women or gay or straight. Let's just see them as individuals. Some people are likable. Some people are obnoxious. Some people are creative. Some people are talented. Some people aren't talented. Um, I just think the entertainment industry, perhaps more than any other, although you do see this in business, you see it in politics as well, the obsession, the obsession with box ticking. It's just, I would point also to gay pride. I'm not against gay pride. I think it can be good in terms of the economy. I think, a big pride event can bring in when people are buying products, when you have chaos and so on. It's a big social event. It could probably be good economically, but I do object to it being, where it's sort of a marathon for companies to jump over themselves to show how inclusive they are. To me, what matters is that they don't discriminate against LGBT employees. What matters is that gay people have equal opportunities to heterosexual people. That should be the focus. I really don't think, for example, police forces should be spending money on redecorating police vehicles in the pride colours. There was recently a controversy over a Royal Navy submarine. Okay, it was decommissioned, but it was used in the Falklands. Um, actually, fixed specifically was a landing craft. But thousands of pounds spent on redecorating that for Pride Month. Now, why? That's just to me, it's just overreach. It's just, is it not enough to say there has to be equality in the law? There has to be a situation where people feel that they are not discriminated against because of their sexuality. But I do think pride goes too far, to be quite honest. I do think that there's groups like Stonewall that bully people into, if you don't agree with them, you're a homophobic monster. That's how that's what they put out. And it's just, it's a deeply, deeply intolerant, dogmatic way of looking at the world. The problem is when you constantly put people in this pedestal of victimhood, it actually, I think it causes them more harm in the long run. Um, and it's the thing about woke dogma, it's like political correctness, but on steroids. Political correctness has sort of been with us since at least the 80s, but wokeism is a whole other thing. Now, the flip side of this, and I do think it's important to mention this, is there are times where people are just being decent human beings, and they are making valid arguments for something that should be done, and then you get some right wing reactionary who comes out and says it's just wokeism. Well, not necessarily. For instance, I think reducing plastic waste, that isn't wokeism, that's common sense. I think if there is racist chanting at a football match, which unfortunately there still is, combating that isn't wokeism. It's necessary because no player should have to endure that sort of racist abuse or homophobic abuse. So I don't say that every every effort to tackle discrimination or tackle prejudice should be dismissed as wokeism. I think the dividing line is when it's absurd, when it's kind of mandated that people take seminars about recognizing their whiteness, their inherent whiteness. One of the most obnoxious terms that woke ideologues came up with in recent years was white privilege. Now, why is this obnoxious? It's obnoxious because it's an example of an entire race, white people, being put into one crude category. Like you're all privileged, you're all, it doesn't matter what your background is, it doesn't matter what your circumstances are, because of your ethnicity, you are privileged. I've made the point to woke people if you have a homeless person, whether they're white or black or Asian, they're going to be facing, it's going to be a very difficult situation they're in. It's a higher rate of mental health problems, there's a higher rate of violence, obviously exposure to the elements. The issue there is socio-economic more than race. So I actually had a quite heated debate with a woke ideologue, and she actually tried to claim that white homeless people are in a better position than black homeless people. I thought that was outrageous. It was callous. It was ridiculous, and I just thought it was the sort of thing that people really take issue with when it comes to woke ideology. So I think the left have to be more honest about this. There's nothing wrong with compassion. There's nothing wrong with being against genuine racism, genuine sexism, and so on. But when you're going around controlling how people speak, threatening to hound people out of their jobs, um, being hypersensitive to the point where you're looking for microaggressions, this sort of thing it's not progressive. It's tedious, it's short-sighted, and it's what gives wokeism a bad name. Um, and I do think the entertainment industry has been shackled with it in recent years. Now, I'm no hypocrite. I like to go to the cinema. I like movies. Um, but I do think that, if Hollywood was toxic in the past for other reasons, i.e., predatory behavior and racist stereotyping, it almost went too far in the other direction, whereby it's diversity for diversity's sake isn't genuine egalitarianism. Um, I think there's many talented minority actors out there who do deserve credit. Some of them have been overlooked, but you know what? There's also been white actors who've been overlooked. Um, the problem with the Oscars so white thing, and granted it's going back a bit now, but 2016, but it actually ended up being harmful in both ways because for white actors it came across as frankly racist. Charlotte Rampling said that, and she retracted it because of the backlash she received. Although I think she was right initially, but actually for black actors it meant that if people were given an Academy Award nod, then critics might say, well, you only got that because of this campaign. So it was a stupid campaign that just ended up, I think, causing more harm than good. Because black actors, minority actors who were actually deserving of the roles because they're damn good actors, if they got nods, and people would have said, and I do recall at the time people saying, well, they're only getting that nod because of political correctness, because the Academy doesn't want to be seen as racist. That's not genuine meritocracy. It's just not. So, likewise, the idea that companies jump over one another to show the pride colours just to show they're inclusive, it's really unnecessary. Now, some might say, well, no one's forcing them to do it. But I guarantee if a big company, if you had lots of companies doing this, there was one big prominent company that decided not to, you would have gay lobby groups absolutely coming out and saying, why are you against pride? Why are you not showing the flag? Even if their actual track record shows that they're equal opportunity employers, that they take discrimination seriously, etc., etc. That should be the focus. Um, Now, there will be people that there's no getting through to. There will be people who are watching this and saying, wait a second, you're a straight white guy. What do you know about discrimination? What do you know about? My response to that is, you don't know me. You don't know things I've been through. I haven't had it as bad as some people. but my life hasn't been that rosy. So, you just can't make these blanket judgments about people based on the race. It's pathetic. And I do think the only form of discrimination that's kind of acceptable is anti-white discrimination. That is wrong. That's what's so odious about this sort of dogma. It claims to be anti-racist, yet it's kind of saying one form of racism is okay because to be progressive, you have to be anti-white. That is nonsense. Um, Now, of course, white woke celebrities like Emma Watson will deny that. I remember a cringeworthy event where she was sitting down and kind of interviewing Renee Edo Lodge, who'd written a pretty obnoxious book called "Why I No Longer Speak to White People About Race," and the pandering and the self-flagellation was really obvious. Um, I don't think you're being progressive by self-flagellating and bowing your head and apologizing for being white and straight. It's pathetic. Don't apologize. Be honest about discrimination. Be honest that there are problems. Condemn those things, but don't apologize for something that's beyond your control. Pathetic. By the way, I'm not saying Watson literally apologized, but just it's an example of I think white woke celebrities are just so the pandering that they come out with. It's just I find it a bit cringy. Anyway, I'll wrap this up. I just think that both left and right are wrong on this. I think the left are dishonest about it. I think they're dishonest about the legitimate criticism. And it's a bit ironic. They say the term, like, don't call someone woke just because they're being compassionate. But they're the people who came up with the term in the first place. You can't criticize the right using the term woke when it's the left that actually coined the phrase in the first place. Just because it doesn't suit them. And for the right, just because someone's being a decent human being, just because someone is speaking out against bullying or advocating conservation or condemning racism or sexism, doesn't mean they're being woke. It just means they're being a decent human being, which we can all afford to be. So that's how I see it. But yeah, I just want to put it on the record because some people might think I've gone soft in my old age or I've kind of moved to the left because I'm deeply critical of Donald Trump, the Reform Party, and so on. But no, I'm anti-woke in the way that it manifests itself. Um, Anti-woke is not the same as being genuinely anti-racism or anti-sexism or anti-homophobia or what have you. Um, I just see through it for what it is. I think it's dishonest. I think it's not going to repeat myself. But that's how I see it. Let me know your thoughts and don't hold back. You know, I'm not going to censor on this channel, and I don't censor. If you disagree with me, explain why, and please do leave your thoughts.